What happened when third-degree black belt Marcus Chen delivered a devastating kick to the face of Tomb Guard Sergeant Michael Torres at Arlington's most sacred site wasn't the retaliation he expected. Standing among America's honored dead, what came next would shatter everything Chen thought he knew about strength, discipline, and what it truly means to guard something sacred. Hit subscribe if you believe real power isn't about proving dominance. It's about protecting honor. The morning mist clung to the white marble of the tomb of the unknown soldier like whispered prayers, each droplet seeming to carry the weight of 3 unknown heroes whose names had been lost to history, but whose sacrifice had earned them the most sacred resting place in American military tradition. Sergeant Michael Torres stood at his post with the unwavering precision that came from 8 months of tomb guard duty and a lifetime of understanding that some responsibilities transcended personal comfort, personal safety, and even personal survival. At 27, Michael embodied everything the Tomb Guard program demanded of its sentinels. His dress blue uniform was immaculate to a degree that bordered on the supernatural, each thread positioned with mathematical precision, each button aligned in perfect formation, each crease sharp enough to reflect the early morning light filtering through the ancient oaks that surrounded Arlington's most hallowed ground. His M14 rifle, maintained to standards that exceeded factory specifications, rested in his white-gloved hands with the reverence of someone holding a sacred relic rather than a military weapon. Michael's journey to the tomb had begun 3 years earlier when he volunteered for honor guard duty after completing a combat deployment to Afghanistan that had left him searching for meaning in military service. Beyond the adrenaline and brotherhood of active warfare, the Tomb Guard program had offered something different, a chance to serve the dead rather than fight the living, to stand watch over heroes whose sacrifice had earned them eternal rest in the shadow of the nation they had died defending. The training had been brutal in ways that combat preparation never was. Physical demands that pushed human endurance beyond reasonable limits, memorization requirements that encompassed every detail of Arlington's history and significance, and standards of personal conduct that allowed for no compromise, no excuses, and no second chances. Of the 47 soldiers who had entered Tomb Guard training with Michael, only 12 had earned the right to stand watch over the unknown soldiers, and only 6 had maintained the perfection required to keep that privilege. Michael's great-grandfather, Staff Sergeant Robert Torres, had been killed in action during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. His body never recovered from the frozen forests of Belgium, where he had died holding a defensive position that allowed his unit to escape German encirclement. For 79 years, the Torres family had lived without a grave to visit, without a final resting place where they could honor their hero's memory. Standing watch over 3 unknown soldiers who represented every missing hero, Michael understood that his perfect posture and flawless movements weren't just ceremonial requirements. They were promises kept to families like his own. Marcus Chen approached the tomb with the aggressive confidence of someone who had spent 15 years convincing himself that martial arts superiority translated to superiority over all other forms of training and discipline. At 31, Chen owned a chain of martial arts schools throughout the Washington, D.C. area, teaching what he marketed as reality-based combat training to students who paid premium prices to learn techniques that Chen claimed were too dangerous for traditional tournaments or sporting competitions. Chen's third-degree black belt in Taekwondo represented genuine technical proficiency earned through years of dedicated training. But his understanding of martial arts had been corrupted by ego and commercial success, rather than tempered by wisdom about when and why fighting skills should ever be employed. His schools attracted students who wanted to learn how to dominate others rather than protect others, who saw martial arts as tools for proving superiority, rather than developing character. The viral social media stunt that would forever change both men's lives had been conceived as part of Chen's Ultimate Reality Check series, where he confronted people he considered fake tough guys to prove his martial arts supremacy. Military personnel had become his preferred targets because they represented everything. Chen wanted to discredit people whose reputation for toughness was based on uniforms and ceremonies rather than what he considered real fighting ability. Chen had researched Tomb Guards specifically, learning about their rigorous selection process and demanding training standards. but he had interpreted their ceremonial duties as evidence of weakness rather than strength. In his mind, soldiers who spent their time marching in formation and standing at attention were inferior to martial artists who spent their time developing devastating fighting techniques and aggressive combat strategies. What Chen didn't understand, what his 15 years of martial arts training had never taught him, was that he was about to confront someone whose discipline had been forged not in comfortable training facilities, but in the sacred responsibility of representing the entire United States military to families seeking connection with heroes they would never see again. Chen's approach to the tomb of the unknown soldier was deliberately designed to maximize the viral potential of what he expected would be his easy domination of another ceremonial soldier. He had positioned multiple cameras around the memorial plaza, enlisted friends to record from different angles, and timed his attack to coincide with the changing of the guard ceremony when maximum numbers of tourists and visitors would be present to witness his demonstration of martial arts superiority. The tourists and military families gathered around the tomb that morning had come, seeking connection with America's honored dead, hoping to find solace in the perfect precision of the ceremony that honored 3 unknown heroes whose sacrifice represented every service member who had ever given their life for their country. Gold Star families stood among the crowd, parents and spouses and children who had lost their own heroes and found comfort in knowing that somewhere, someone stood eternal watch over soldiers whose names might be unknown, but whose service would never be forgotten. Chen stepped across the chains that marked the boundaries of sacred ground with the casual disregard of someone who had never learned that some spaces demanded reverence, regardless of personal beliefs or objectives. His movement disrupted the solemn quiet that surrounded the tomb, drawing concerned looks from visitors who sensed that something inappropriate was about to happen in a place dedicated to honoring the dead. "Hey, toy soldier!" Chen called out, his voice carrying across the memorial plaza with deliberate disrespect, designed to provoke the reaction he needed for his viral video. "I hear you tomb guards think you're some kind of elite warriors. Want to see what real fighting looks like?" Michael's response was the measured silence that had been drilled into him through months of training designed to prepare tomb guards for every possible disruption while maintaining the dignity and sanctity of their sacred duty. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his breathing controlled and even, his posture perfect, despite the growing tension that was building around the memorial as other visitors began to recognize that something was going seriously wrong. But Chen had come looking for conflict, not conversation, and Michael's professional composure only fueled his determination to prove that ceremonial soldiers were inferior to dedicated martial artists. Without warning, without further provocation, Chen launched himself forward in a devastating roundhouse kick aimed directly at Michael's face. His technique representing 15 years of training and refinement, the kick connected with sickening force. The impact hard enough to snap Michael's head back and draw blood from his nose while sending his military cap flying across the memorial plaza. Chen landed in perfect fighting stance, immediately prepared for the retaliation he expected. The wild swings of an angry soldier, the clumsy grappling of someone without sophisticated fighting training, the kind of desperate aggression that would make for compelling social media content. But what happened next wasn't what Chen had trained for, expected, or prepared to handle. Michael absorbed the blow with the controlled breathing he had learned, not from martial arts classes, but from the sacred responsibility of maintaining composure under any circumstance while standing watch over America's unknown heroes. Blood ran from his nose as he straightened his uniform, retrieved his cap, and returned to his position at the tomb with the same perfect posture he had maintained before being attacked. Chen stood frozen, his perfect fighting stance suddenly feeling ridiculous in the face of Michael's unwavering dedication to something larger than personal pride or the desire for retaliation. He had expected a fight that would justify his attack and provide content for his video. Instead, he found himself watching a soldier demonstrate the kind of discipline and sacred commitment that Chen had never encountered in any martial arts school. The kind of strength that came from serving something infinitely more important than personal ego or the need to prove dominance over others. Other tomb guards began responding with the swift efficiency of professionals trained to protect the sanctity of their sacred mission. These weren't angry fighters looking for revenge. They were guardians responding to the desecration of holy ground with the kind of coordinated precision that preserved the dignity of the tomb while ensuring that such violations could never happen again. Michael remained at his post throughout the incident, his focus on his sacred duty rather than his injury, his concern for the honor of the unknown soldiers rather than personal satisfaction or revenge. His face continued bleeding, but his bearing remained perfect. His attention remained fixed on his responsibilities, and his commitment to protecting the sacred memory of America's unknown heroes remained absolute and unshakable. As military police and cemetery security surrounded Chen, something profound began to unfold that would transform everyone present's understanding of what strength really meant when it served something sacred. The Gold Star families in the crowd, who had come to Arlington seeking connection with their own lost heroes, witnessed Michael's response to desecration with the kind of recognition that comes from understanding sacrifice on the deepest possible level. Among the observers was Margaret Walsh, an 82-year-old woman whose son had been killed in Vietnam and whose body had never been recovered from the jungle where he died trying to save his wounded sergeant. Margaret had been visiting the tomb of the unknown soldier for 47 years, finding comfort in the knowledge that somewhere, someone stood perfect watch over heroes like her son, whose names were known to God, but lost to history. Margaret approached Michael as he maintained his post, despite the blood still trickling from his nose, her aged hands trembling with emotion as she spoke words that would be remembered by everyone who heard them. "Son," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades learning what real strength looked like. "What you just did, choosing to honor the dead instead of fighting the living, that's what my boy would have wanted. That's what every mother who lost a son would want to see." Chen, still restrained by security but now forced to confront the reality of what his attack had represented, began to understand that he hadn't just assaulted a soldier. He had desecrated the sacred space where America's unknown heroes rested, had violated the trust that millions of military families placed in the soldiers who stood eternal watch over their missing loved ones. Captain Jennifer Martinez, the commanding officer responsible for tomb guard operations, arrived to assess the situation and found herself witnessing something she had never seen in 12 years of military service. A tomb guard who had chosen to maintain his sacred duty despite being physically attacked, who had demonstrated the kind of spiritual discipline that went far beyond military training to encompass something approaching religious devotion to the honor of the dead. "Sergeant Torres," Captain Martinez said, her voice carrying deep respect for what she had witnessed. "You need medical attention, and you need to file an assault report. But before we handle the administrative requirements, I want you to know that what you did today represents everything the Tomb Guard program stands for. You protected the honor of the unknown soldiers even when you couldn't protect yourself, but..." Michael's response revealed the depth of understanding that had driven his decision to maintain his post despite being attacked. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady despite his injury, "those 3 soldiers gave everything for their country, and history couldn't even preserve their names. The least I can do is make sure that nothing, not personal pain, not personal pride, not personal safety, interferes with the honor they deserve." The conversation that followed between Captain Martinez and Chen would later be described by witnesses as one of the most profound discussions about military service, martial arts, and the difference between fighting for ego versus serving for honor. Chen, facing federal charges for assault on a military installation, found himself confronted not with the anger and desire for maximum punishment that he had expected, but with military personnel trying to help him understand what his attack had really meant. "You have genuine martial arts skill," Captain Martinez told Chen, her words carrying the patient authority of someone explaining complex concepts to someone who needed education rather than punishment. "Your technique was flawless, your power was impressive, and your training was evident. But skill without honor is just violence with better form. Martial arts are supposed to teach you to protect the sacred, not violate it." As Chen listened to explanations of what the tomb represented, not just to military families, but to the entire concept of honoring sacrifice and preserving memory, he began to understand that his 15 years of martial arts training had taught him everything about fighting except why fighting should only be used to protect things worth preserving. Michael, despite his injury and the disruption to the sacred ceremony he was sworn to protect, made a request that stunned everyone present. He asked to speak with Chen privately, not as victim to attacker, but as one person trying to help another understand what it meant to use strength in service of something greater than personal achievement. The conversation that followed, conducted in the presence of military chaplains and witnessed by the Gold Star families who had seen their sacred space violated and then protected, would become a testament to the power of genuine discipline to transform even the most misguided aggression into understanding of what strength was really meant to accomplish. The conversation between Michael and Chen took place in Arlington's chapel, surrounded by memorials to America's fallen heroes and witnessed by military chaplains who understood that they were observing something profound about forgiveness, education, and the transformation of violence into wisdom. Chen sat in restraints, his earlier confidence replaced by growing understanding of the magnitude of what he had done and the grace of what was being offered to him. "Why aren't you pressing for maximum charges?" Chen asked, his voice carrying none of the aggressive bravado that had marked his approach to the tomb. "I attacked you at the most sacred site in American military tradition. I violated everything you're sworn to protect. Why are you trying to help me instead of making sure I pay the highest possible price for what I did?" Michael touched his injured nose, which had been treated by military medics, but remained swollen from Chen's perfectly executed kick. "Because being angry wouldn't help either one of us learn anything useful from what happened today, and it wouldn't honor the memory of the soldiers I'm sworn to protect." "You came looking for a fight because you thought martial arts were about proving dominance." "I didn't fight back because I learned that real martial arts are about protecting things that are sacred." The conversation that followed would later be described by military chaplains as one of the most profound discussions about service, sacrifice, and the proper use of strength that they had ever witnessed. Michael explained his own journey from soldier seeking personal achievement to guardian understanding that some duties transcended individual concerns, that some responsibilities required complete surrender of personal desires in service of something infinitely more important. "My great-grandfather died in World War II, and his body was never recovered," Michael said, his words carrying the patient authority of someone who had learned difficult lessons through experience rather than theory. "For almost 80 years, my family has lived without a grave to visit, without a place to honor his memory except in our hearts. When I stand watch over those 3 unknown soldiers, I'm standing watch over him too, over every hero whose name was lost, but whose sacrifice was real." Chen listened with growing understanding as Michael described what the tomb represented to military families who had lost loved ones, the weight of responsibility that came with maintaining perfect standards in service of people who could no longer speak for themselves, and the profound honor of serving something that went far beyond personal achievement or recognition. "You have real skill," Michael continued, acknowledging Chen's martial arts proficiency, even while helping him understand why that skill had been misused. "Your technique is better than anything I could do, your training is impressive, and your dedication to martial arts is obvious. But skill without wisdom is just ego with dangerous tools. The strongest martial artists I know are the ones who use their abilities to protect what's sacred, who understand that every fight you avoid in service of something higher is more important than any fight you win for personal pride." As their conversation continued, Chen began to understand that his attack on Michael had revealed not the soldier's weakness, but his own ignorance about what martial arts were supposed to teach. He had spent 15 years learning how to hurt people, but had never learned when that ability should be used, had developed devastating fighting techniques, but had never developed the character to understand what was worth fighting for and what was worth protecting through refusal to fight. 6 months later, Chen appeared before a military tribunal to face charges for his assault on Michael at the tomb of the unknown soldier. But instead of the defiant martial artist who had attacked a tomb guard to prove his superiority, the tribunal encountered someone who had been transformed by understanding what his victim had been protecting, and why that protection mattered more than personal pride or martial arts. Reputation. Chen's community service was assigned to Arlington National Cemetery, where he spent weekends helping maintain the grounds where America's heroes rested and assisting with ceremonies that honored military families dealing with loss. Working alongside tomb guards and interacting with Gold Star families, Chen encountered daily reminders of what Michael had tried to teach him, that real strength was measured not by your ability to dominate others, but by your willingness to serve something greater than yourself. The viral video Chen had intended to create never materialized, but the lesson he learned became something far more valuable. An understanding that martial arts, like military service, were supposed to develop character alongside technique, wisdom alongside strength, and the discipline to protect the sacred rather than violate it. In learning to serve the memory of America's fallen heroes, Chen finally discovered what his 15 years of martial arts training should have taught him from the beginning: that true warriors protect what matters most, even when no one is watching, even when no one will ever know their names. So what do you think? Is real strength measured by your ability to fight back, or by your commitment to protecting what's sacred even when you can't protect yourself? Have you ever seen someone demonstrate the kind of discipline that transforms an attack into a teaching moment, that turns violation into understanding? When does choosing not to retaliate become the strongest possible response? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear about times when you've seen true strength in action.